Part of the reason behind Cartagena's increasing tourism is a phenomenon known as slum tourism. Earlier, my colleague Mike Walters spoke to Koens, a lecturer at Breda University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands, and he asked him to describe slum tourism.
Well, basically, slum tourism is tourism to impoverished urban areas. And at least part of the attraction tends to be the impoverished living conditions of the people. So you could say that it's poverty really that has become the attraction to at least part of tourists who visit it. The term itself is probably not very familiar, but maybe terms like favela tourism in Brazil or township tourism in South Africa are a bit more well known. For example, in South Africa, township tourism really has taken off, and I believe it's at least over 1 million people a year who visit the townships in South Africa.
What fuels this?
Two main drivers around that. Partially, you have those tourists who go for the excitement. It's they seek the exotics of what they expect to be more or less the wild. So yeah, the expectation is nobody wants to live in poverty, so it must be authentic. And it's exciting. It's exciting to say to your friends at home, "Oh, I've been to the slums." That's one group. And on the other hand, there's a group who would try to understand a country a bit better and who say, like, I don't want to turn a blind eye to difficulties that there may be in the countries that I visit. I actually want to understand and get a full picture of the country. And again, like the example in South Africa is that you can go to all the nice places, but that's only part of it. It is a country with a lot of poverty, and you have to also appreciate that if you want to really know the country and see what you're going to visit. So you have these two main drivers amongst tourists that are very different, but in a way relate to the same form of tourism.
We saw it here in the United States after Hurricane Katrina. The area, of course, in New Orleans, the city itself devastated. And I was down there, and you'd see bus tours of ravaged neighborhoods, but a lot of the people who lived in the area were kind of upset about it. Is there a disconnect in terms of the people living in these communities and the people touring them?
Unfortunately, quite often there is. And it mainly happens with the kind of tours that you're describing now. People coming on a coach and just driving through. The analogy that's often made is it's like watching people in a zoo. So that definitely is a disconnect there, and that's a massive issue. Also for a lot of other areas where people visit these impoverished areas and where they try to make it more interactive and more transparent and get tourists on a more equal level with the local people. So people go out for walks and talk to local people, which is actually a lot more, friendly and interactive. But those bus tours, they are really, what you described is a disconnect.
You know, it's interesting, you look at a place like Jamaica, there are some people there that subsist on just one meal a day, and yet you have these all-inclusive resorts where people are eating all day long. And so, framing it that way, you have all-inclusive and perhaps the all-exclusive. You have people who can eat all day long, and you have people who don't eat anything at all. How do you square that one?
Well, again, it is a very difficult one. The problem there is that as long as a lot of people have been going to these kinds of countries, there has been this disconnect. And it seems that people have always more or less turned a blind eye to it, or a large amount of people. And it's only now that with forms of tourism like slum tourism or tours to the Katrina area, that people have started to open up to it and look into, so what's happening here? The problem is, at the moment, it's very difficult for us to find ways to deal with it and to ensure that the tourism that goes to these areas actually also benefits the local people whose houses and whose country is visited. So that is a serious problem that I'd say there's still too little of the tourism dollar that stays within the country that is being visited. And it's something we still need to look into how we can improve that.
And I was going to ask you, are there local governments that are trying to figure out a method to tap into these tourism dollars so that the dollars do stay there and actually benefit the people?
Well, yeah, there's actually quite a lot of governments trying it, but it's incredibly hard, particularly because the tourism industry is not always very transparent. So even for local governments, it's sometimes hard to understand like which companies do bring in most dollars to the community and which ones take out more than they bring in. So that's a serious issue, and governments around the world try to make it work and try to improve the situation, I would think, in a lot of areas. Um, but they also have difficulty with understanding the local context and understanding which companies, in a way, do better than others, just because it's, yeah, not the most transparent industry, unfortunately.
Co, one final question. Is this a growth industry, or do you see this as just a curiosity, maybe a blip in the radar screen, or is this something that's going to has some staying power?
I think it definitely will have sustaining power. Like I said earlier, you already see that in South Africa, it's mass tourism now. Um, in Brazil, it's increasingly growing, and with the mega events that are coming up there now, the World Cup football and the Olympics, I think it will grow rapidly there. And around the world, everywhere we now see these things pop up. So you would now have it in Indonesia and Thailand, various countries in Africa, even continental Europe. There are certain tours coming up. So you can really see it pop up. And I think it's because people have done a lot of things now, it's another new type of exotic location that is there to be visited to a certain extent. So I definitely think it has some sustaining power. In the long run, I don't know, but the medium to long run, I definitely think it will remain there and it will grow.
Co Koens, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.